Each generation literally is a reflection of the values of the previous generation. And as we're looking at this current generation, what are they showing us about ourselves? And what parts of it do we love? What parts of it don't we like? And then what parts do we have the power as leaders to change or to transform and to help them navigate?
Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Hey, Rob.
How are we doing today?
Great.
You are powered by your chai latte, so you've got that caffeine just pumping through the veins.
It was a gift from my kids who were out and texted me and said, "Do you want anything?" I said, "Yes." I was feeling it. Needed a little pick me up.
You're living
this
the
morning.
dream. That I aspire to as a parent, is get to the point where my kids are bringing me coffee.
Yes. Today is my wife Alice's and my anniversary. So
happy anniversary.
Thanks. They were thinking about us, which is really sweet.
Wow, that's really thoughtful. Yeah, you've done something right as a dad when that is happening in your life. You bring your favorite drink. Not quite there yet, but hopefully the day comes.
It's in your future. Just hang in there.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today, David. I know you are as well. This one is timely. It's also fresh. We've never really taken a topic on the 1110 Leadership Podcast quite to this level before. Not that we haven't gone deep, but I think approaching it from a pretty unique angle. And I'm excited to welcome my good friend and now friend of the 1110 Leadership Podcast, Katrece Boyd, onto the pod. So for our listeners who don't know a little bit about Katrece, she's the executive director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Development at North Carolina Central University, go Eagles, where she drives innovation and economic mobility for students, faculty, staff, and the broader community. She's an ICF credentialed coach and trained facilitator. She's also the founder of Boyd Business Group, LLC, offering leadership development services to businesses and government agencies. She's got over 12 years of experience in financial services as a business counselor with the Small Business and Technology Development Center. Katrece brings a wealth of expertise to her work in academia and economic development. She's passionate about advancing economic mobility, specifically for under-resourced communities. And she also, if that wasn't enough, serves on several boards and councils, including NC Ideas Black Entrepreneurship Council and Habitat for Humanity's Advocacy Committee. She is a graduate of Tuskegee University, and she is driven by her love for people and her desire to see them thrive. David, I know that gets you excited, and not the chai talking. That bio, I know, is your love language right there.
This was a great conversation on many levels, not just because of Katrece, her perspective, her story, understanding what motivates her, but this unique conversation around how we engage Gen Z and young entrepreneurs and what they care about, whether they're working in normal work environments or the young people that Katrece is working with in the Entrepreneurial Center at North Carolina Central, who are thinking about building businesses and what they care about. We run into this a lot with our leaders who are hiring young people and trying to create environments in their companies to enable everyone to thrive, particularly those who are newly in the workforce. And so the insights that she's providing for us today on Gen Z, what they care about, how we can lead them well, how they can grow themselves, is incredibly timely, and it's also quite insightful. So I was on the edge of my seat listening to her because I wanted to know the answer to the next question. because I needed that myself. So I'm excited to have us share her with our listeners today.
Yeah, our listeners are in for a real treat for all the reasons that you've mentioned. And without further ado, we'll turn the floor over to our conversation with Katrece Boyd. Katrece.
Rob.
Welcome to
Katrece.
the 1110 Leadership Podcast.
Katrece.
David is dying laughing for our listeners right now because I do that to him on the beginning of every episode. That's what I do. I just I say his name, and you just pick right up with it and roll with it. This is going to be great. We're so happy to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, Katrece, you and I go way back quite a bit. Our listeners don't know this, but back to my nonprofit leadership days, I've worn many hats. You've worn many hats, and some of those hats have brought our worlds together. And I'm just so thankful that they did. And I think this will be a conversation that's really got a lot of rich personal history to it. And so I'm really excited knowing you, knowing your abilities, knowing your wisdom, and just how you carry yourself in the world. I'm just really looking forward to this conversation and for our listeners to get to glean a little bit of your wisdom from you today.
Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you.
And we recorded this offline. People didn't hear this, but you and David have soccer in common apparently now, because you just came back from a fun soccer trip overseas, and David has done that same thing. So apparently I need to get on the bandwagon here of becoming a soccer fan.
Rob, it's football.
Sorry. Well, we're recording this in North Carolina, America, so I'm going to say, I'm just kidding. Football, right? Yeah. Isn't that how they say it? I don't know. Katrece, I'd love to just jump straight in. I know our listeners are probably eager just to hear more of your story first and what lessons you've learned along the way around leadership. You've worked with a lot of leaders in your career, entrepreneurs, probably more specifically. And I love your personal business motto. And I gleaned this from LinkedIn. You don't say this in conversation with me, but I found it online. Everything is figure outable.
Yes.
That is fun to say. Everything is figure outable. Would love for our listeners to hear just a little bit about your backstory. What led you to that work and what appeals to you about working with business leaders and entrepreneurs specifically?
Yes, I so appreciate this question because I always start from my youth. So I go back to the nexus, the beginning. But when I was growing up, I was never a kid who wanted to be a teacher and then a lawyer and then a doctor. I was pretty clear that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur when I grew up. I wanted to be my own boss and own my own business. So that's what I would always tell everyone. But my parents were entrepreneurs. So we owned a small company. It was called Equity Mortgage. And we essentially would help our community refinance their homes and use the equity in their homes for different reasons, whether it was retirement or different needs. And so my father started this business by literally reading a book. There was I don't think the internet existed in like the 80s. So there was no internet. He read a book and he started this business, and it grew to a point where eventually it brought him out of the workforce. It brought my mom out of the workforce. From probably into elementary through the beginning of high school, I saw them grow this company, and it just sparked something in me. And then in the early 90s, there was a piece of legislation that passed that essentially eliminated some of the benefits to their target audience. And so overnight, we went from having this business that was progressing, that was growing. Both of my parents were living in it. We were really doing well as a family, to really losing everything. We ended up losing our home. We ended up losing our cars. The business ended up failing. And I think for me, what that did is I saw the effort that it took my parents to build this. But then I also saw what the failure, quote unquote, of that business did to not only our family, but to them as individuals. So I saw how it impacted their identity, how it impacted their ability to provide, how it impacted how they felt. My mom for many years felt guilty because she felt, hey, the Lord was telling me to do certain things and I didn't feel like I was obedient, and look at how it impacted our family. And so when our family struggled financially for years, really a lot of years after that, throughout college and when I got my first job. And what that did for me is I realized entrepreneurship was not just about this outcome of, hey, I'm providing you a service and you're paying me money. It was really about the people, period, like who you're serving and also the people who are building. And so I got into this work initially. When I think about entrepreneurship, I always want to be an entrepreneur. I always tell people I thought I was going to be on some high-rise building in heels, owning things. And as I grew and started really working with entrepreneurs, first in the financial service industry as an agency consultant, so I would go into different agency offices and help them either start their agencies, gain market share. Agents that were established in the financial service industry, I would help them grow. And then agents who were looking to exit, I'd help them exit, et cetera, that whole trajectory. But the theme that kept coming up in my life was it's not just about what you do, it's who you are and who you're becoming. And for me, this work was not just about helping entrepreneurs build something that's sustainable, but it's who are you building on the inside? What are you becoming on the inside? And how is this business supporting your community, supporting you in a healthy way, and supporting you in a way that isn't tearing away at your identity? Because we can become these businesses and being this entrepreneur. It's so sexy now to be an entrepreneur, but really, who are you as a person and as an individual? And so my parents' journey living through that felt like a calling for my life, and I'm still living it. Yeah.
Wow. Katrece, that is so insightful, so encouraging, particularly that your parents' story didn't deter you. It sounds like it focused you, it grounded you, and gave you a real sense of depth to what it means to be an entrepreneur that I think a lot of us miss, because as business owners, I'm thinking a lot about how I just make my business work versus the whole reason why I got into this, which is what you just described, how it's shaping me and how it's shaping the people that we ultimately get to serve. So I'm curious then, what led you to your current role at North Carolina Central? And what a part of that is a part of your journey that then allows you to live out what you just described?
Yes. When it was the end of 2019, I had gotten out of the financial service industry. I was traveling a lot. My travel would pick up. Me and my husband were trying to build a family, and it just became too much. And so I had told him, hey, I'm going to go and do this coaching and consulting thing full time. We're just going to trust the Lord, and I'm going to do that. And so I did that for several months. So I've been a coach for years, but I did that solely for several months. And then as we neared the end of 2019, we started thinking about health insurance, and I started looking at options for people who were independent. And there just were not a lot of options for women's wellness when you're looking at family planning. And so Dominique was like, hey, that's my husband's name, Dominique. He said, hey, let's just look at finding like a part-time gig or something where you can get some health insurance and still your coaching practice is going well. Let's figure out how we can keep this going. And honest to goodness, Rob and David, I heard the Holy Spirit tell me, I think it was like September of 2019, you're going to work for the state. And my husband works for the state. And so I was like, God, I don't think that's what I'm called to do. I don't want to be a state worker. But if that's what you want, sure, whatever. Forgot all about it. November 2020 or 2019 comes around, and long story short, my husband starts sending me jobs. The very first job that popped up was with the Small Business and Technology Development Center. And I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, but it's a counseling arm of the SBA, these development centers. And I knew that was the job that I was going to have. Applied for it, got into it. I worked for the SBTDC for 3.5 years out of NC State, right when the pandemic started. And so working in academia and in economic development was literally never in my wheelhouse. I never thought that I'd be doing that. And as I started to work with the SBTDC, it was really a continuation of the work I was doing in the financial service industry, but with a more diverse group of small business owners. And so I was counseling, supporting, helping them grow. But in the realm of kind of this educational atmosphere. So a colleague of mine who worked at NC Central knew about this executive director position that was opening up, and he recommended me to it. So I had a conversation with the dean of the School of Business, Dr. Anthony Nelson. And at the end of, I think it was 2022, we started having a conversation. July 2023, I came on board as the executive director of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. And David, how it connects specifically to where I'm at today, or what I feel like is my mission, is I think that when I think about really helping these entrepreneurs shape who they are in the midst of what they're building, I think it's important to start with this younger generation, right? I love working with entrepreneurs who are established. The messy middle is my jam. But I think there's something to be said about these young individuals who are coming up today and who are also coming up with in a different cultural environment than we are growing up in. And again, it's not something that I had planned, but what I see and what I believe for me, what God is doing is I tell my students all the time, I'm more concerned with who you're becoming than what you're doing. And we're constantly going to be working on that character and building that, because I believe out of that is where you're doing is going to grow. And that's how I got there. That's how I believe it connects. And there's just some cool things happening at the university.
Yeah, I'm excited to take the conversation there next, because I think while we've talked about business leadership a lot on this podcast, and we've talked about entrepreneurship a lot, and even the principles that you're highlighting of who we are, apart from what we do, has a lot to do with how we view ourselves and our leadership and our relationship with health and rest and being able to stop and have healthy rhythms that are tied to our identity. I think you bring some really unique insight due to that position, working with not only entrepreneurs, but specifically now Gen Z entrepreneurs. Right. And we haven't really gone there on this podcast before, breaking down how the cloth is cut differently, right? Depending on your age, right? And this emerging workforce of folks, Gen Z defined as people born between 1997 and 2012, which puts them between 12 and 27 years old. You're working with the upper echelon of that demographic, right? College students who are in their late teens, early 20s, looking at entering the workforce. So before I just glean from your wisdom, tap you, say, hey, Katrece, just want to hear your thoughts on all of it. Couple framing statistics in the backdrop of this conversation that I think would be helpful. So some stats around Gen Z. 35% of Gen Z employees feel that their employers are meeting their expectations for training, mentoring, and development, compared to 61% of employers who believe they're doing enough. That's according to LinkedIn. So you already right out the gate, you see this huge disparity between expectations perceivably being met and actually being met. 66% of Gen Z workers want frequent in-the-moment feedback, but only 24% of managers say they provide it regularly, according to Deloitte. 40% of millennial and Gen Z workers expect a promotion within the first year. This has come up a lot in our peer groups, even recently with some of the business leaders we work with that are not in this demographic. And I'm sure you can guess how that conversation, which creates a real gap between expectations and this traditional career advancement of previous generations. When it comes to work style, 65% of Gen Z workers prefer digital communication, mediums like Slack and Microsoft Teams, whereas many leaders rely on face-to-face meetings or email, which can lead to friction in collaboration. 77% of Gen Z workers prioritize flexibility and even say that flexible work arrangements are non-negotiable, so either hybrid or remote work. And yet only 48% of companies have implemented flexible work policies, according to Forbes. And then only 30% of Gen Z workers feel they have a strong sense of connection to their team. So this irony of they're citing remote work as a key barrier, even though they desire it, which leads to leaders struggling to foster team cohesion. And then last but not least, we talked about health already. A couple stats around mental health in this generation specifically. 46% of Gen Z workers report feeling stressed or anxious most of the time at work. It's almost half report feeling anxious or stressed most of the time, compared to 33% of older generations, according to the American Psychological Association. And then 50% of Gen Z employees feel overwhelmed by the volume of their work they're expected to handle in their first few years, especially in high pressure environments. So
this is the messy middle colliding with Gen Z.
You say messy middle, let's go there.
And it's become chaos.
It's the Wild West out there, guys. It's like, here you are, Katrece. What a job you have preparing this generation to enter a workforce seamlessly. And not just that, like maybe even start their own business, not even get a job, but go out and launch a business in this kind of environment with these types of expectations. It almost feels like two ships passing in the night. So I say all that so that we could then say, Katrece, please solve all this for us. Like, we are so happy that you're going to be able to do that. But no, my question would be, starting off with, you've worked with this emerging entrepreneur population now for several years. What has surprised you most about your work with that demographic?
Oh, yeah, this is the question. Where do I start? No, I think listening to those stats, I think it's really interesting because I think all of them are true. And then there's an and. There's always a backstory behind what those statistics are telling us. I think what's been most surprising, if I do this from a plus delta perspective, I think the plus is that this generation really craves meaning and they really want to do meaningful work. They want to live meaningful lives. They're not satisfied with clocking in, clocking out just for the sake of that. Meaning is extremely important to them. So sometimes I call them bleeding hearts, like all the activism and all the ways in which they show up, it's because they have so much information coming at them, but they also realize they want their lives to be impactful and they want to be able to do something about it. Whether they're doing entrepreneurship, we get so many students trying to come and do, they always come from this framework of nonprofit work because they want to do something that's meaningful. Or if it's a job, a lot of those requirements are because I don't want to live a life that is just a 9 to 5, clocking in, clocking out, and seeing what my parents did or my grandparents or whoever. I think the thing that was surprising because you don't think that when you see people scrolling and jumping off buildings and do crazy stuff on TikTok, you're like, what is going on with this generation? But they genuinely care and they really want to live a meaningful life. I think the delta that was surprising is collectively, they are very bold. Individually, there is sometimes this timidity that I see in communicating. There's a timidity when it comes to socializing, not knowing how to advocate for themselves. There's a hesitancy in just taking risks in their lives. And those two don't always seem to be congruent. So those are two areas that I think were probably most surprising.
Wow.
Hey, business leaders, are you and your team truly thriving? The Thrive Assessment from 1110 Leadership is designed to help you find out. This powerful 360 tool uncovers key leadership opportunities and challenges to help foster growth and help you build a thriving workplace culture. With insights into trust, health, relationships, impact, value, and engagement, you'll gain a clear understanding of where you stand and how to improve. But what sets the Thrive Assessment apart is the relational process. It's so much more than just an online survey. Our team walks with you through the results, providing support and coaching to help you and your team thrive together. Ready to take your leadership to the next level? Visit 1110leadership.com to learn more and start thriving today.
So it's interesting, Katrece, we're seeing that too. We do some training for young college grads, and the deep sense of meaning just comes out coursing through their veins. I'm curious, as you have worked with them, what happens when they feel like either that meaning can't be achieved or it was a pie in the sky, we're going to change the world deal, and then they get into reality, and reality is not what it seems. And so what do you observe about them as they gain some maturity, gain some experience, and try to understand how they need to develop the skills and the mindset that can allow them to be in it for the long haul? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And as I think about that question, I generally work with a population that hasn't had that reality just yet, but I do see them facing it constantly. In the center, we employ students, we call them our seed fellows, and they're helping to build the center. So they have real jobs, they have real titles from VP of finance to promotions, etc. I sometimes see the challenge or the disconnect between what is the ideal and where they, even in this role, how they like to show up versus what that actually takes. And the fact that everybody's trying to live their best life, right? So we all have to meet with some level of compromise. I think what I've observed is oftentimes at first there is a deflation. It's met with a lot of disappointment. There is sometimes this lack of resilience in the sense that if I don't get my way immediately, I'm never going to get my way. It's never going to happen, etc. And that can be frustrating because you're constantly dealing with this lack of reality and how life works and the time that it takes and the patience, etc. What I have found is effective in that, at least in our center, is empathy and this hyper communication. And I think what I mean by that is we have found this generation is not the do it because I tell you to. It's because I said so. We all grew up with parents. Shut up, because I said so, and that worked. Like, you don't talk back to mom and dad. That's not this generation. This generation is curious. They ask why. If it doesn't make sense to them, if they don't understand something, they're going to speak up about it, or at least you can see it in their body. Their body will give off what they're feeling, what they're emoting, etc. But when they can connect to a vision, so our fellows connect highly to what we're building at the center. Even when they're challenged by something, they're willing to lean in. If they can understand why something is required, if I have to go into the office, why does that matter? Is it just a way to control me? Or does it actually create community? Does it actually build a culture that matters? I can wrap my head around that. I can't wrap my head around because I said, or because that's just the way it's always been. And so I think that there's a little bit more massaging, communication, things that we have to do to help keep them connected and engaged. But there is the initial response definitely sometimes is even ghosting. Never hear from them again. But there's more who want to engage than what people would believe, I would say.
Katrece, I love that you're taking it there. In our work with leaders, we really try to drill down and emphasize this importance of kind of that, the Simon Sinek start with why, which can seem trite. And it's been said so many times, but it ages so well. Like this idea of, do you know your why? And is it what's beyond the bottom line? It's, when we talk about the impact of your business, don't just give me a revenue number of, I want it to grow to this size, because to your point, that's not going to engage the next generation of the workforce. Younger employees want you to connect the task you're asking them to do to the overall purpose of the business. And therefore, that means your business needs to have a purpose beyond just making a lot of money.
Right.
Back to this meaning question. And as you think about what advice you would give to current business leaders, let's assume they're of a different generation, right? They're older than 27, usually, running businesses, leading businesses, or potential investors who are considering investing in a business that is being launched by one of your emerging entrepreneurs. Advice for how they go about engaging that next generation. How do they go about harnessing their potential, and really what that generation, this generation of Gen Z, has to teach them? Because the stats give a bad rap of what we're sharing, but like you said, there's so much more. So can you speak more to and what they have to teach their leaders and how they can lead up within a business?
Oh, that's so good. So I think engagement actually begins with us as leaders. I think sometimes we forget that leadership is always in service to people, even before the vision. The vision is in service to people. And so I think that, and I think you just said it, Rob, we can't make our entire organization about the vision, about the strategic objective, about the end result, about the end goal, and use people in service to that end. We have to center people. And I think that's challenging sometimes. Let's be honest, in this world where things are moving at the faster than the speed of light, information is available faster than the speed of light, competition is moving faster than the speed of light, tech, everything is just moving so quickly. People oftentimes just feel like they're trying to keep up. But I think that there is wisdom in, I just feel like the way that the Bible and Jesus taught us, like when you look at Moses and this big vision that God gave him about bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt and into this promised land, that's this ultimate vision. And Moses is looked at as the ultimate leader. But one of the things that you constantly see is Moses was constantly in service to these cantankerous individuals that he served. And it wasn't that he was in service to just these people, he was in service to the Father and constantly in service to the vision that the Father has given him. And so that may seem nebulous or a little bit scriptural. If I can bring it down to what it looks like practically, I would say if you ever played a sport, think about your favorite coach or the worst coach that you ever had. And when you think about your favorite coach, everyone on the team knew that the purpose was to win. Like, we know that we got to win. But one of the things that your favorite coach may have done, or that you could remember about your favorite coach, is they also knew how to create this balance where we know we got to win. That's the objective. But I also knew that he or she was developing my character. He or she was highly invested in who I am as an individual. He or she knew that win meant more for where I was going after the win than just the win itself. And so I think there's this place where you have to hold in balance the reality that, yeah, you're running an organization and that organization needs to win. It feeds people, it houses people, there's a bigger purpose than just making money. But how is this organization also in service to both the employees and the customers? And I think when you think about a bad coach, same thing. The bad coach is in service to self, in service to the vision, in service to their title, in service to, and you see these bad outfits that come out of this bad coaching. You're not going to save every single person that you coach. You're not going to win every single person that you coach, but you will impact more when you think about who you are in service to constantly. I would say that's the frame that I would give for really how to engage this generation is, and I think I told you all earlier, I'm reading The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. So this is really feeling fresh for me. But there is this place to slow down, even if it's in your one-on-ones. How do you take it beyond the conversation of production? How do you actually ask, how are you doing? What's going to make this valuable for you? What's missing for you? And I think the second thing is, what's funny, I did this whole poll with my students before this podcast last night. So I was asking them some questions and the whole chat just blew up. So that would be fun to look at later. But surprisingly, some of the things that they said, they're not aliens, they're like us. They want feedback, just like the statistic had shared. They want that feedback in the moment. They want you to be honest. They are ambitious and they want to grow. They want to know what their growth opportunities are. The thing that they're asking for most is, we also want balance. And so when I go back to that why, I want to understand if I'm going to be sacrificing additional hours, or if I'm going to be driving an hour to work, or if I'm going to be, show me why that matters. Show me how that's impacting something bigger than just another $1 million in the pocket of the business. So I think that's that part of the question. And then you had a couple other questions that you had tacked on at the end.
I think about this. I feel like in the last few years, the generation gap has grown pretty significantly between the messy middle and the group that you're working with, Katrece, because of just, again, information, technology, the things that people care about, et cetera. So for leaders to engage with that group, it feels like they have no idea what to do. And so it's really encouraging to hear it's just the basic stuff.
It is.
I mean, it's just to stop and say how you're doing, or just
remember they're a person is what I think she said.
Just stop.
I don't know if it gets more basic than that.
Yeah, and we have to remind ourselves as leaders that it really is about people, and giving context is so important. People think that's just a side thing that we're supposed to do versus a main thing. I'm curious to flip that question and ask you, what advice are you giving the people, the young entrepreneurs that you are working with, in terms of how they can lead up, how they can engage, how they can make a connection, not just expect it to come from the leaders that are over them, but the things that they need to take ownership of themselves to bridge that gap?
Yeah, all of that. I think one of the conversations I'm constantly having with my students, there's a couple. One is patience. They want things like yesterday. They want, sometimes there is this frenetic movement of, I have to be at this place. All of my students, I got to be a millionaire by the time I'm 25. And I'm like, babe, good luck. The average millionaire is like 40 some, 60 some, right? And so I think there is this constant practice of patience. So not just telling them be patient, is what does the practice of patience looks like?
Mm-hmm.
How do you bloom where you're planted? How do you get rooted? So if I give you an assignment, what have you done in that assignment for you to be qualified to go on to the next thing? Not that you just check the box. What are you doing in order to grow yourself? And so patience is one of them, and then teaching them the practice of patience and what the purpose of patience is, which is your own growth and your own development. I think there's a scripture that says, let patience have its perfect work so that you can be whole and complete, lacking nothing. So patience is literally meant to grow you. I think the second thing I'm constantly having conversation with them about, and this, we hear this term a lot, but there is so much truth to it. It is this idea of resilience. And I hate to say it because we hear it so much, but when I say resilience, I really mean not just being able to bounce back when you have a setback, but I also think it's in the way that our students think. And what I'm realizing is they have so much information coming at them at one time that they are taking in a lot, but they digest very little. And that's impacting how they actually think. That's impacting the depth at which they think. And for example, we recently started a book club with our Seed Fellows. They hate to read a physical book, but I make them because there's something different about digesting a physical book and sitting with it and having to bring your 3 takeaways to our group meetings than listening to a book and then just going on about your business. You have to sit. And I think that I'm teaching them there is a way of life and a rhythm of life. And when you can learn how to think, you can learn how to navigate life better. When I say think, it's you need to be able to learn how to make decisions. You need to be able to learn how to discern what is, truth from error. You need to be able to learn how to determine what is a value of yours versus a collective value that you're just buying into. And so navigating some of those life things with thinking. So patience, resilience, and learning how to critically think in situations are things that I think me and my team are constantly working on our
Yeah.
students with.
Love that.
Wow. When you say physical book, you mean
Paper. Paperback.
I'm just trying to, I just want our listeners to fully grasp the radicalness of that act. Like you say, not just listening, but like not Kindle, not even Kindle.
Not even Kindle. They can download it, but you got to have the physical copy.
Wow. No, I think that's fascinating. I think I read a stat from Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, recently that talked about the difference actually in absorbing physical content in paper versus screen, and how that does help embed this slower pace of being more present to what you're actually engaging with when it's not in a digital format. So I think the trends are reinforcing that it needs to be done more often. And so I think, the stats are in your favor there. Katrece, this has been, wow, what a rich conversation. I feel like we could go on for a long time. And I think it's truly a gift to our listeners, especially if those who are in positions of leadership or aspire to that. The ever changing, right? This is not a set it and forget it conversation. Like age is by definition always in flux. And so for us as leaders, I think it's such a great reminder that we need to always be sharpening our leadership skills, not just for ourselves, but for the people that the workforce is constantly turning over. And so we got to be ahead on these themes and these trends, but also it's not this kind of cutting edge, always do the new thing, because so much of what you shared is ancient, right? You're quoting Proverbs all the time and go back centuries. And so it's these ancient truths of what does it mean to truly see other people? What does it mean to really, be present and be still and just be able to humanize each other? And so it is somehow both radical and yet so old at the same time. And so I love the balance we've struck in this conversation. We love giving our guests an ability to leave a bottom line for our listeners. And so word of advice, closing thought, anything that you feel like something you feel impressed upon to share as a final word for our folks as we wrap this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that each generation literally is a reflection of the values of the previous generation. And as we're looking at this current generation, what are they showing us about ourselves? And what parts of it do we love? What parts of it don't we like? And then what parts do we have the power as leaders to change or to transform and to help them navigate? And then I think the second thing, Rob, is just what you mentioned. As much as we love new and novel, this Gen Z, they are people, they desire the same basic things that we desire. It may show up differently. It may show up through technology. It may show up at a different level of speed. But if we go back to literally the basics on how to engage and help them embrace the basics, some of them they've never grown up with basics, I think we can get a greater yield. It will take time, and that can sometimes be frustrating, but I think that the return on that time is going to be completely invaluable for your organization and for the culture, the employees themselves. And so, I would say that age-old wisdom is where it's at, and you just have to invest that time in this generation. And it's good that they're challenging us in this way, because there's some things, if there's one thing that I think we can learn from them, there is an imbalance in our culture, and their challenge, their pushback is forcing us to really think about this imbalance. And we should lean into that and determine what part of their pushback isn't healthy, and we need to help reframe that for them. But then what part is actually a reflection where we need to ask ourselves, maybe we need to actually lean into what they're telling us. And I think that's what I'd leave your listeners with.
So great. Thank you, Katrece. Huge wisdom.
Thank you.
as we begin the year.
As a company who has literally named itself after a proverb, when you hear age-old wisdom is where it's at, to which David and I both say, amen, amen. Wow. Thank you so much, Katrece. This was a gift. Really enjoyed this time with you. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you all for inviting me.
To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.